Right now, Lucy, you've got a poetry exhibition currently on display at Blackpool Central Library, haven't you? Tell us a bit about that.
Blackpool Library got in touch with me and asked if I could produce an exhibition of female poets of the First World War for August, starting on the 4th of August, which of course is the day on which Britain joined the First World War.
Right, so how do you do an exhibition of poetry? What's actually there for people to see?
Yes, well, I started by researching female poets, and in order to make it easy for people to look at, I researched their life stories and then condensed them into a fairly brief resume, found a photograph, and then found a couple of reasonably short poems so that all the information could be printed on an A3 size panel, which people can read fairly easily with or without glasses, find out a little bit about the poet and a taster of their poems, and then if they're interested they can go and find out more and search out more poems.
So tell us about some of the poets that are featured in the Blackpool exhibition.
May Sinclair, because she comes from the northwest, she was born on the Wirral Peninsula in Rock Ferry, and she's also a very interesting person. By the beginning of the First World War, May was a very famous writer and poet, and she was famous in the United States as well as in the UK, and she was interested in quite a lot of different areas, including psychology, and she lived in the south by then, near London, and served on a committee with a man called Dr. Hector Munro. And when the First World War broke out, Hector Munro gathered together people to take to France and Belgium with a flying ambulance unit. The idea was to use motorcycles to rescue wounded soldiers and take them to clearing stations and base hospitals. And May Sinclair put up a lot of money for this particular unit, and she also accompanied Dr. Munro for the first 6 weeks of their time in Belgium to act as his personal assistant. While she was there, she helped with looking after refugees, because obviously what happened when the German army overran Belgium, people fled from their homes and they were housed in various large centres, as refugees quite often are, even these days, and they needed feeding, and May helped out with that. She wrote about her experiences. In fact, she wasn't a young woman. She wasn't able to stay there for very long. She only stayed for 6 weeks, and she came back suffering from shell shock, but she wrote about her experiences, and she also wrote 2 beautiful poems which she dedicated to the ambulance unit, which are featured in the exhibition.
Now, it's not just poets from the UK. You've got some female poets from, well, right across the world, haven't you?
What I wanted to do was demonstrate the global impact of the conflict, because I don't think there'll be one country in the world that wasn't in some way affected by the war. So I tried to choose poets from as many different countries as possible. For instance, Flor Bela Espansa is from Portugal. Portugal is Britain's oldest ally, dating back to the time of John o' Gaunt, when his daughter married the King of when his daughter married the King of Portugal, and Portugal sent troops and medical officers and supplies to the Western Front during the First World War, and there are many of them buried on the Western Front. And I felt that it was important to include them. And I also included poets from Germany, for instance, and one very interesting one was a Polish-born poet who, after the First World War, actually came to live in Blackpool. Her name's difficult to pronounce, you'll have to help me here. Maria Pawliskowska-Jasnorzewska.
That's right, I think that sounds okay, yes.
And she came, after the First World War, she came to live in Blackpool, was taken ill, and went to hospital in Manchester, and unfortunately she died there, and she's buried in Manchester Southern Cemetery. So if anyone listening has any time to go and look in the Southern Cemetery and find Maria's grave, it would be lovely to put a poppy there.
Now, there's also a fairly well-known, certainly in Fleetwood lady poet, isn't there?
Yes, also featured is Margaret Rowntree, whose maiden name was Fish. She was born in Fleetwood, and she went on to become the first Lady Mayor of Fleetwood Borough. She was a prolific poetry writer, and much of her poetry was published in Lancashire Life, the magazine, and also in the local paper. And so she's well worth having a look at as well.